Hey guys, I am back. Sorry I haven't made a video in a while, but I've still been kind of sick, and in fact, I'm actually not 100%. I can't. Everything coming in this ear is still very muffled. This ear is better, but I don't think it's 100%. And then I'm still a little congested, and then I still have my cough, unfortunately. And then, we went to my grandma's for Thanksgiving, and then we were supposed to have family coming to town this weekend to celebrate the sort of, another Thanksgiving for the other side of the family, but then that fell through. They ended up canceling the plans. So now we're actually having a little Thanksgiving amongst the three of us, which will be kind of nice, although I feel really bad, but thinking that the smell of the food and stuff is making me a little it's not making me a little ill. Not actually throwing up, but I cannot be near the food right now, and not in a I'm gonna eat it, but as in I'm just really not hungry. And but hopefully this evening I will be hungry. I hope. But anyway, I know this is a video idea that I saw Reagan from Peruse Project do on Thanksgiving. I watched the video on Thanksgiving Day, and it's a little late because it's kind of a Thanksgiving type video, but I didn't make any videos, and figured, you know what, who cares, I can do what I want, because it's my channel, and, so this, sorry, my door is doing that weird thing again where it opens on its own, and I swear, I think I might have a ghost or something. I mean, probably not, but it's kind of fun to think that maybe, one of my grandpas is, lurking. Well, actually, that sounds kind of creepy, but maybe they're here watching me in not so creepy way. And that's why my door keeps opening. But no, it's probably just probably not. Probably just it doesn't want to close. So I'm gonna do books that I read this year that I am thankful for, which is inspired by Reagan from Peruse Projects. Okay, so let me move this stuff over here. Okay. And I'm only doing books I read this year, and I'm not doing books that, because I did read a few rereads this year, I started, back in 2017, I started my reread of the Lunar Chronicles, and I recently just started rereading Kate Morton's books. Although I've already read The Forgotten Garden twice now, but I will probably read it again maybe next year. But I decided, I went ahead when we went to South Carolina, like any other book person, I brought way too many books, even though we were only staying for 2 days at my grandma's. So I did start to reread, I can't remember what it's called at the moment. I'd have to look at the book. See, I might have it here, sitting here. It's gonna fall. I did start reading The Distant Hours again, which is kind of like kind of more one of her more gothic stories, which is really fun. But obviously, I'm not gonna include. I won't include it anyway because it's not. I just started it, but yeah. So anyway, there's actually a lot of books here that I would love to include, but I can't technically include them because I just started reading them. But I know I'm gonna love them because they're not that hard to please. As long as it's something that I would, because there are things that I won't read. This year has confirmed that I don't like thrillers because they're just boring to me. And but anyway, so that's just enough with the rambling. Let's get started. Okay, so first book I'm gonna say, and this is no particular order. This is just how I stacked them. It's actually not in the order I wrote them down in my little notebook here, but just how I stacked them. And I'm going to say Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I am grateful for this one because I finally read it. It's a classic sci-fi horror book. And I'm glad I read it because it also opened up the door to read The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, which I don't have, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I don't think Frankenstein is everybody's cup of tea either. But in case you don't know, this is basically about this guy who decides to create life and play God, and then what he creates turns out to be not what he expected, and it kind of messes with his life a little bit. The creature he's created kind of starts messing with his life a little bit. And there's really big consequences to his actions, which he does not take credit for. He does not take responsibility for his actions. He just is blaming his creature, which is really messed up. I really like this book. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it for the first time earlier this year. It was such a good book, and like I said, it's not everybody's cup of tea, like with the writing style and everything. I think a lot of classics are very challenging. Even though this is a short book, I could see where this one would be a little challenging with the writing and everything. And it's not always exciting. You would think it would be with with this plot and everything, but it's not. It's very much Dr. Frankenstein whining and bitching about his situation. And there's a lot of talk about, literature. There's a lot of references to literature of the time period, and there's lots of philosophical discussions between and it really looks at what right do we have to who has the right to play God, and it really looks at who is the villain here in this story. It asks you that question. Is Dr. Frankenstein, is Frankenstein himself a victim or a villain? Is the creature a victim or a villain? It seems like at first, especially with all those movies that they made, that the creature is just some dumb brute, or that he's a vicious monster. But in truth, he's, in the original text, he's not. Yeah, he kills people, so yeah, it does make him that. But at the same time, he's not there's more to him than meets the eye. So I'm really glad I read this finally. And I also have context for it when I get back into watching Penny Dreadful, which I don't know if I ever will, because I was a little iffy about I think it was the last season, where there was a bit of a love triangle, and I'm just I'm more as I've said in the past, I'm more tolerant of love triangles than most people, but sometimes I can understand why people don't like them. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Dragon Rider Chronicles, and I'm actually reading another book that is, although I might stop because I'm kind of getting bored with it. Even though it's cute, it's fun, but it's very long, and it's not, as I've said also in the past, I get anxiety when I know that even though, and yes, I'm well aware that I can, with library books, I can always renew them. I get that. I'm well aware, but still, I'm sorry to say, it still gives me anxiety when I know that I have to return at some point. Because I want to make sure that I actually return on time and I don't have to pay them a little bit of money, which is usually probably 10 cents or something. Because, it bothers me. It gives me anxiety. It's hard to explain. I know I can renew them, but it bugs me. So, anyway, but yeah, that is also called Dragon Rider. But I'm talking about the Dragon Rider Chronicles by Nicole Conway. I am very glad. Now, I didn't technically start the series this year. I wanted to say I started back in 2016. Or early to, I think 2016. This is a 4-book series. I have the 4th book around here somewhere. The final book. this is a middle grade book. I think it's middle grade, about this young boy who is half human, half elf, and there is a lot of animosity and race and against the elves, the gray elves as they're called in this world. And our main character Javine is discovered to be a potential dragon rider. And so he gets to go to Library Academy, where he gets to learn how to be a dragon rider. But he experiences a lot, like I said, a lot of animosity because he is a gray elf. And there's also the typical elements of what you experience when you're, a kid in school. Going to school, all the drama of being a teenager, like your first love and bullies and making friends and it's such a really good, fun series. The writing style is very simple because, it's middle grade, but it's still very fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I just realized the second book is actually a lot long. It looks like it's a bit longer than the third book. But I'm going to read the fourth book soon. I don't know if I'll read it this year, or if I will read it next year. But this is just a fun series, and it's quick. It's a lot, like I said, it's a lot shorter than the other dragon book that I mentioned earlier, a few minutes ago. But I definitely recommend checking out this series. And I think it's gotten out there more, because I know she wrote a spin-off series. She started to write a spin-off series. And one of my favorite booktubers, Marcy Napier, I know she was given the first book in the spin-off series, and I'm assuming she's figured out about this series, because although I think with a spin-off series, I think you don't have to read the one that came before first. I think it helps, but I don't think it's going to kill you if you read the next book, the spin-off series first. I do think this first series, the series that came before, in this case, this one, will give you some context to the spin-off series, but I don't think it's gonna really throw you off or anything. I don't know. I haven't read the first book of the spin-off series yet, so who knows? Maybe I'm totally wrong. But in my experience with spin-offs, whether it's a TV show or a book series, or it doesn't usually it's not well, no, actually, because I feel like you do need to read the Grisha trilogy before you read the Six of Crows duology, because there's a magic system that you might not get, and there's references you might not get that are referred to in Six of Crows that come from the Grisha trilogy. So yeah, maybe I'm totally wrong here, and that maybe it is good to read the original series that came first. But anyway, yeah. So I would say those words. Next, I'm going to talk about The Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier, which is a retelling of the Six Swans series about this girl whose brothers get turned into swans by a witch, and she must make them these shirts made out of nettle, I believe, to turn them back by a certain time. So it's basically that story, but there's a couple added things to it, like you learn about the family, and the witch is kind of more involved with the family because she tricks and seduces the father of the main character and her brothers. And there's between and it's medieval Ireland in the story, so it's a war between Ireland and Britain going on, and there's a little bit of a love story, but that doesn't come until later. So for those of you who prefer just the fantasy aspect, what's great about this one is, yes, there is romance, but it doesn't come until later, and it does not dominate the story. It does not dominate the plot. But such in Sorsha, our main character, our protagonist, she's just a strong-minded character. She knows who she is. And she goes through a lot in this book. She suffers quite a bit in this book. And this is a series, but from what I know about the other books and this one, and what I read in this one, you could technically read. You don't have to read the whole series because this is a complete story. And I believe the next two books are complete stories. To each of them individually are complete stories. But it's basically the overall arc is this family. Sorry, I hope I don't gross you out. I'm sorry if I end up discovering that I have stuff coming out. But anyway, and there's a blurb by another writer that I haven't started reading her books, but I've got 2 of her books. That's Anne McCaffrey. I have 2 of her books. I bought them back when they had a sale at the used bookstore for fantasy books. But anyway, this is just, I am so glad to read this because this got me, I mean, I read like books like The Name of the Wind and stuff, but, this kind of got me into like the older fantasy. And I remember liking, like, I read the Dragonlance books, and I really loved those, I enjoyed those, and I would love to rebuy them. And this book kind of reminded me of that, and got me back into that, because, so that's why I'm really glad I read this book. And I've had this book for a long time, and I almost got rid of it quite a few times. Like, I almost took it out of my shelf, but then I was like, you know what, because I need to read it, which the reason I started thinking that was because Sam from Sam's Nonsense loves Juliet Marillier and, talked about this book quite a bit. So I was like, okay, I need to finally read this book. And I'm so glad I did. Of course, what ended up happening is I decided to keep it. I'm not getting rid of it because I really enjoyed it, and I do want to read the rest of the Seven Waters trilogy. And I also want to read some R.A. Salvatore because this book, which it's not by R.A. Salvatore, it's Juliet Marillier, but it's kind of the same, like, thick, older fantasy. And I've actually, so in a way you can directly say this book is the reason why I want to check out more books like this. So next is I Am Thankful for Hunted by Megan Spooner. I have been wanting to read more Beauty and the Beast retellings because, that's what A Court of Thorns and Roses was by Sarah J. Maas. That technically was one, but it wasn't 100%. Which it kind of actually frustrated me because the direction it went, her series, she went with her series, and how the guy who was kind of the beast in that first book ended up not being such a great guy in the later books, which I was really mad about. Not that I was a huge fan of Tamlin, but still, it was like, it was Beauty and the Beast. It was my fairy tale. And yes, okay, fine. Maybe I am a little sensitive. Maybe I shouldn't be so sensitive, but you know what? I grew up with that story. The Beauty and the Beast. The Disney version, anyway. That one has meant a lot to me. And I did read the original. I did have a copy of the original story, which I gotta admit, I'm not a big fan, surprise, of the original fairy tale, but I do love the Disney movie. So I've been wanting to read more retellings of it. So I read Crimson, I think it's Crimson Beauty. I think that's what it's called. I read that one. Or is that her read the name of the Red Riding one? I don't know. Anyway. But I can't even remember who the author's name is. But anyway, so I discovered this is another recommendation by Murphy Napier. And she talked about how great this book is. She absolutely loved it. And like I said, I've been wanting to read more Beauty and the Beast retelling, so I'm so glad I read this. This so far it's on my list of favorites this year. And I think I did a back in the middle of the year when I was one of the many people who did my favorite book so far this year. This one was included in it. and it still is one of my favorites. I prefer this one over the other being mystery retelling I read, Crimson Beauty. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure if that's what it's called, but this was such a great retelling. I'm so glad I read it. And in case you're interested, this is about this girl, Eva, and she, after when her father goes missing and she discovers his body, or discovers him, I don't know, I can't remember if she discovered his body or not. She goes into the forest to hunt the person she believes killed her father, and then she comes across this beast, and she ends up getting captured and taken to his castle, where she makes a deal with him. He is like, so that she can prepare herself to get revenge, she agrees to hunt something for him that's part of his world. And of course there's a curse involved that she is potentially gonna break, and all that good stuff. And it's been a while since I read it, so even though as much as I love the book, I don't remember it completely. So I don't even, so that's not the best description of the plot. But anyway, I am so glad I read this. I'm so thankful that it exists. Although I did hear that her other book, her Robin Hood retelling, is not as good as this one. And a lot of the stuff I heard that happens at the reason why the booktuber that I watched, did a review and criticized it. Some of the things she said, I would probably not. I don't think I would like either. The next one is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. I know not everybody. There are a lot of controversial opinions about this book. A lot of people don't like the second half of this book. But I am so thankful for this book, and I am so glad I enjoyed it. I know a lot of people are critical of the fairy tale aspect of this, but it's different. It's supposed to be a bit weirder and not supposed to have a traditional fairy tale-ness to it. But basically, it is about this girl, Alice. Her and her mom have always been on the run, and one day her mom finds out that her grandmother is dead, and we realize that's who they've been kind of running from. So her mom thinks they're safe and everything, they're good now. But then her mom gets kidnapped. And it's up to Alice to figure out who kidnapped her mother and save her from whoever kidnapped her. And she realizes that it's connected to this book of fairy tales that her grandmother wrote, that are really popular, that are a bit different from traditional fairy tales. And she has always been told never to go where her grandmother lives. So she hooks up with this guy who happens to be a fan of her mother's fairy tales, because her mother's fairy tales are have a cult following. And she hooks up with this guy who knows a lot more about her grandmother and her grandmother's fairy tales than she does. But what's weird is that all of a sudden, aspects of her grandmother's the characters from her grandmother's fairy tales end up showing up in their world, and start following them as they try to travel to her grandmother's house, where she believes her mom might be. So this is such an interesting, very dark book. And I think it's going to be a series. I think the author is going to eventually, Melissa Albert is going to write more books. I don't know. I think she is. Maybe not. I don't know. I hope she does. But this is a bit different. Like I said, it's not the traditional fairy tales. Like, this world that her grandmother created is very different. It's very dark. There's no happy ending. Not that the original fairy tales that the Disney movies are based on were happy all the time. I mean, they were about like kids getting eaten, getting, people getting poisoned, and lots of death, and morbid ways to warn kids to stay away, not do things. But this is not. But this is, even compared to that, The Hazelwood is very much more different than that. It's even darker. And there's no, fluidity to the stories. Like, there's no moral message or anything, they just happen. This is such an interesting book. And the other thing I know that a lot of people don't like is the main character, Alice, is not very likable, but there is a very good reason why Alice is the way she is. And some people might say it's an excuse or whatever, but it's not one of those. But I mean, it's not one of those things like, oh, she had a bad childhood or something. It's not like that. The reason is a little different, is nothing like that. But there is a reason. And I love this cover. And I'm definitely getting more into, like, hardcover books. I really, before I didn't care, and I'm so used to getting paperback books because, I didn't have a job, so, and it's just cheaper. And I still get paperback books, especially mass market paperback books, because they are cheaper and you can travel with them more easily. But I definitely get why people love aesthetic-wise hardback books. And I love the feel of this cover. But anyway, I am thankful that I read both these books. And glad I have. And I'm very tempted to put them back on my shelf. Okay. Okay, next, I have to get through this really fast. Next is Nevermore by The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. For the longest time, I did not read Middle Grade. I'm still iffy about Middle Grade, like the Dragon Rider book that I mentioned. That's not that other series that I'm thankful for, but is about dragons. I'm a little iffy about continuing with that. I actually got that book because it's the same author who wrote Inkheart, and I remember liking the movie, so I figured, I should get into this author. But anyway, so I'm a little iffy about it. I don't know if I want to continue or not. But I did absolutely love this story. This was so fun and whimsical. It's about this girl, Morgan Crow, who is believed to be bad luck for her town. Everything that goes wrong to people in her town is her fault. So she has to, apologize to them and everything. And she is also told that on her 11th birthday, she's going to die. But then, all of a sudden, she gets this mysterious man, Jupiter North, this mysterious eccentric man, Jupiter North, shows up and whisks her away to the world of Nevermore. Just in time. And she must pass, and she will be able to go to this magical school for the Wonder Society, but the only way she will get into the Wonder Society is if she passed these special specific trials. And that's what this book is about. It's such a fun, whimsical read. Like I said, I can be very picky about middle grade books, but I have started reading them a lot more. And I absolutely love this book, and I'm going to continue with it. And I just love it. It's such a fun book. Next book I am thankful for is Heartless by Marissa Meyer, which is an origin story of the Queen of Hearts. And I am very much glad. Again, this is another book I'm thankful that I read that this year. Now, I had already loved her Lunar Chronicles, and this came out. I was late to the game when I read this book this year. But I am so glad I read it because, I loved the Lunar Chronicles, and I enjoyed her writing, I enjoyed her story, and I just wanted to read more from Marissa Meyer. And I am glad I got this because it introduced me to her other books, other things that she could write. And I'm going to read Renegades at some point, I don't know when, but I did buy it. I actually bought it on clearance. So I got a hardback book on clearance of Renegades. But I can't include this in this because I didn't read it yet. But yes, it introduced me to her writing beyond the Lunar Chronicles, and that's why I'm thankful for this. And I also think it's I'm not a huge fan of the Alice in Wonderland story, but I do like the movie. I like the movie adaptations of it, and I love origin stories of villains. I think it's a really cool concept, and that's what this book was, an origin story of a villain. Next is Cersei by Madeline. The next book I'm going to say I'm thankful for is Cersei by Madeline Miller. This is about the witch from the Odyssey story. The witch who, like, Odysseus has stayed on her island for a little too long. And I never read the Odyssey or the Iliad, but I do believe people painted her, Cersei, as a bit of a villain, and this one decides to take a more positive spin to her character. We get a lot of background, which I really like. I'm so, like, even though I never read the Odyssey, I appreciate that the author, Madeline Miller, took the time to kind of give her a backstory, explain where she came from, and her relationship with her family, and how much of a struggle it was for her to please them her whole life, and how she finally, by the end of the story, by the end of her journey, she finally accepts who she is, and that she's never going to satisfy her family. She embraces who she is. And it's a feminist take. And now you could argue that it's just, like, this version of it is very biased to women. You know, it makes it look, you know, but really, that's the point. She's taking a more female spin to the story and making this female character look, you know, more interesting and better than what she is in the original context that she comes from. So, you know, who cares? Like, it's, you know, and it was a great book, very enjoyable, and it's definitely introduced me to more literary works. And at some point, I am going to read Song of Achilles. I do have it on my Amazon wish list. So, I don't know if I'll get that book for Christmas or not, but who knows, maybe I will. But anyway, I really am glad I read this book, and I'm so thankful that I read it. Okay, so let's get through these fast. Next, this one I read more recently, and that is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is, again, another Sam from Sam's Nonsense recommendation. She absolutely loves Robin Hobb, and finally I got around to reading her books, and I'm so glad I did. I've only read one of her books, and I'm in the middle of reading the second book in this particular trilogy. This is the Farseer trilogy, and she's one of those fantasy authors that writes books that are like, she'll write one trilogy and then another trilogy, and it's all the same universe. It's all kind of part of the same overarching plot, but they're about different characters and different perspectives. And this is about Fitz, who is the bastard son of one of the princes of this world. And Fitz is taken in by the king, the prince's father, to be his little, like, to be, you know, part of the family, but not part of the family. And he is trained by, first he is taken in and kind of raised by Beric, who was the stable master. So he learns a lot about animals. And while that's going on, he kind of develops this special ability called the wit, which means he connects mentally with animals. But unfortunately, Beric believes that, you know, in his experience, that when you connect, you have the wit, you become more beast than man. So that's one of his problems, is he has to hide his skill of the wit. And he also, and then he ends up being taken in by the king. The king ends up sending him to be trained by Shane, who trains him to be an assassin. So he ends up being someone who kills for the king. And he essentially, in this book, kind of is from when starts with when he's 6 to all the way when he is a teenage, when his early teen years. And it's a first-person perspective, and it's from Fitz's perspective, so it's not always going to be, sometimes it's going to get a little tedious, but this is not a recommendations video. This is a video about me. I keep talking about recommending these books, and it's not technically a recommendations video. But I just love this. I'm so glad I read. Once again, I've been brought into the world of adult fantasy, even though this is about a kid and him growing up. Like, I've read a lot, mostly, for the longest time, I was always reading YA books, YA fantasy, which I still love. I still hold a place in my heart. But there are some things that books like this introduce that YA fantasy doesn't have. There's a lot more depth to these stories, and you get a lot more content, obviously, which does take a while to read. But I am so glad that I read this. I love Fitz's character. He's so adorable, and I want to take him in and protect him, and nurture him and everything. He goes through so much in this book, and he's going through a lot in the second book as well. He's just a kid, and he's given this responsibility by the king, and it's really hard on him. He doesn't really get to be a kid, or he does for periods of time, but then in this book, that's taken away from him really quickly, and you just feel bad for him. And it's such a fascinating story. I love reading Fitz's journey, and I am continuing with reading about his journey by reading the book The Royal Assassin, which is the second book in the Farseer trilogy. And then I also got the first book in the Live Ship Trainers trilogy. And I'm very glad I didn't get rid of the dragon book, which is part of this world as well. I'm glad I didn't get rid of it. Next is, I am one of those people who jumped on the Mistborn bandwagon. I am so glad I got into Brandon Sanderson, another adult fantasy author that I'm so glad I read it. And I've only read this book, now I've read 2 of his books. I just finished The Well of Ascension recently. I just love this world and this magic system, and I just think it's such a cool series, and I'm so thankful that I was introduced to Brandon Sanderson and his writing, and I'm just reading more and more adult fantasy books. And it's so cool. It's basically this, this world has been taken, like the bad guy won, and be the chosen one. So this world is ruled by the Lord Ruler, who's a tyrant, and these people decide to rebel against him and start trouble and try to stop him for good, and they are led by Kelsier, who is what is known as a Mistborn. Like, the magic in this world is your elements are your misting, which means you can control metals, which I think is such a cool thing. And we have, in Kelsier is a Mistborn, which means he can control more than one metal. And he discovers this girl Vin, our main character, who is part of the lower class people, the peasants of this world, Scott, who get the brunt of the Lord Ruler's tyrant method of ruling. And it turns out that Vin is also a Mistborn, and he gets her to join his little team of rebels. And her job is to infiltrate the nobles of the Lord Ruler's kingdom. And she disguises herself she is trained as a Mistborn and is trained as a noble lady. And this is such a good series. And again, this is another one that it does have fantasy, it does have romance in it, but in my opinion, it does not dominate the story. The romance definitely is more involved in the second book, but in this first book, it's not as involved. But it is there. And I am, this was such a fun series. The magic system is really cool. And I'm very glad I'm very glad I read it. I'm glad I'm getting more into fantasy, adult fantasy. Next is The Secret History. I finally finished this book up in May. And I love Donna Tartt's writing style. It's such a good writing style. It's basically this young man who, college age, he applies to this small college in New England because, he hears how great it is, and when he gets there, he decides to get involved in this. He decides to sign up for this special class that is very selective of their students, and they essentially study Greek and in classics. And they're, like I said, they're very selective and a bit snobby. And this is not a spoiler. It's in the summary. But someone has been murdered, and one of their group members in this whole book is basically about not only about our main character joining this group, but also about this murder and this murder being committed and why it was committed and the aftermath and consequences of these group of kids committing this murder and how it affects our protagonist. And this is such a good book. Now, again, this is another book that is probably not everybody's cup of tea, but it's so interesting. Like I said, I love the writing. And I always had a thing for reading. I love reading about pretentious characters. I find a lot of people, that's what people say is the problem with why they don't like this book, because it's about pretentious people. Which, I mean, that's the point. They're all snobs that are studying Greek. I mean, that is the point of the novel. And I'm so glad I read it, and I enjoyed it, and I'm definitely, again, this is another one that's kind of got me more into literary fiction. Okay, I got 3 more books here, and then I've done it. Hopefully, I won't have to redo this whole video. And if I do, it won't matter what I'm saying right now. So, next, I want to say is, I am thankful for Sarah Waters' book, for The Paying Guest, which introduced me to Sarah Waters, and I've also started reading, I think it's The Little Stranger. I started reading that one as well by Sarah Waters, and I almost read Tipping the Velvet, but then, I think it was April from Getting Hygge With It, had read that book and talked about how great it was, and I know I'm a little late to read it during the spooky season, which was a month ago, but just like my shirt's a little late for reading it. Like, see, I'm reading a Jack Skellington, but he celebrates Christmas too. But I decided to read it because I think it's a good book to read around the fall and November time either way, even if it's past the spooky season, I think. But anyway, this is, I don't know when she wrote, what number is this book that she's, but this is I'm so glad I read it. It, like I said, it introduced me to Sarah Waters. It's basically set in 1922. This mother and daughter, it's after World War I, and this mother and daughter are forced to, so they can pay the bills because our protagonist's father left them in debt. So, to pay the bills, they have to take in some tenants to live with them. And they take in this young couple, the Barbers, and our protagonist, Francis, falls in love with the wife of the young couple, and it's about them having their affair, and of course, it was even worse that people were even more homophobic back then in the 1920s than they are today. And so it's not, it's not only are they having an affair, but also they're a gay couple. It's such a beautiful, tragic romance. And I love her writing, and again, I'm glad this introduced me to Sarah Waters. Plus, I love the 20s. Okay, so next, I really hope this video I don't have to remake this video, and there's no point in what I'm saying right now. Next is, I am very thankful that I read Home, a memoir of my early years by Julie Andrews. Yes, the Julie Andrews from Mary Poppins and Sound of Music fame. This is her memoir of, as the title implies, her early years. When she started in Broadway, when she was a little girl, and we learned about her time during the World War II and how when she was living during the London Blitz and how it really affected her emotionally. But we also get her experience with Broadway, and we learn how the Broadway works, how it's not entirely different from Hollywood. And we don't really go into we are a little hinted at the Hollywood and her going to Hollywood, but that's about it. Like towards the end, we get a little bit of her talking to Disney and him asking her to be Mary Poppins. In her conversation with P.L. Travers and how P.L. Travers was not entirely happy. If you've read Saving Mr. Banks, you kind of get the idea that she was not happy with the Disney movie. But anyway, and I'm a fan of Julie Andrews. I feel bad that I've only seen Sound of Music, Mary Poppins, and the Princess Diaries franchise, but I mean, I would love to. And I did see Cinderella as well. I did see her version of Cinderella on when it was, because I think my parents recorded it one time, so we had a VHS version of it. It's so interesting. If you're a fan of Julie Andrews, I definitely recommend it. It's a very interesting, compelling read, and I'm so glad that I got to learn more about her, and I'm definitely even more interested in finding ways to see her other work beyond her, from her early years. And then the last book I'm thankful for is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. And I think BookTube is probably the only place where I won't have to be like, no, I'm not talking about North and South by Jonathan Jakes, which is a Civil War based novel. I'm talking about the Victorian novel, North and South. This is basically kind of a Pride and Prejudice story about where this young woman. See, I'm not entirely okay because my nose is so congested. But you have our main character, one of our female protagonists, Margaret Hale, and her father is a parson in a small English village in the south of England. But then when he does not like how the church is being run and stuff, and he doesn't agree with them, so he uproots his family, much to a chagrin of Margaret and his wife, to the north of England, to a city, to a town, industrial town, where Margaret meets Mr. John Thornton, who is one of the mill owners of the town, and of course it has a lot of the elements of Pride and Prejudice, miscommunication, these two people butting heads all the time and disagreeing, when the guy falls in love with Margaret, but she doesn't feel the same way at first. But this also isn't just about that. You also get the whole idea of what was going on, how the Industrial Revolution, and how it affected people. Like the impact of that, and the whole thing between workers and mill owners, and how the workers wanted more pay because of what they had to go through working at these mills. And Margaret sides with the workers. She becomes friends with a particular worker in his family. And it's also, it also has a little bit of religious talk. It discusses religion, which is not in the miniseries. Because, of course, even a miniseries has its limits. But I am so glad I finally read the book. It's such a fascinating read. And yes, I know this is blasphemous, but I prefer this over Pride and Prejudice. And I can officially say that because I read both books now. And I definitely, if you're a fan of Pride and Prejudice, I definitely think you should check Elizabeth Gaskell. I think you should check this one out. And that is the last book I'm going to talk about that I am thankful for. So, are there any books that you are thankful for that you read this year? If so, feel free to share what they are in the comments below. If you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and click subscribe if you hadn't already. And as always, enjoy your reading, and I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!